Okay, so from my perspective, God writes his law in your heart. And that's the stuff you know from the time that you're a child. You can't take somebody else's lollipop. You can't take their little toy car. You don't hit somebody for no reason. There's all these things that are kind of born with. And it's only as we grow up and the more we deal in school through their education and things like that, we can TV and radio and music and all these different things we're just bombarded with this whole different system, okay, that has been set up to rob us of the natural state of man. Man was created. Persons were invented. And it's really important to understand that. And, a lot of people, it's kind of funny, you'll hear people all the time saying, well, I want God to help me, or why doesn't God help me, or he failed me. And, sometimes I just kind of feel like there's this generic God out there that has 1,400 and 1,000 different faces and beliefs, and it's like, okay, I'm not taking away anybody's right to believe in that, but just from my perspective, if you don't really understand what law is and truth, because we're scattered, it's really hard to say that we can count on the Creator to help, because there's so much information that it's hard for him to get to a point where, like some people, it's like you talk to them, they don't get it. And, they're like, well, what about this? And what about that? But this says this, and it's, something is preventing them. And some people say it's like, you're not being a man. You're not being a man. Well, and that's true. But what is the root of that? Like, we can just say you're not being a man and reprimand them, or we can say, well, here's why I think maybe you're having this struggle. So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase a lot and move kind of quick. But essentially what happened was there was this, I believe, I always mispronounce it, but it's Code of Hammurabi. It was created. It was a mercantile code. It was invented a long time ago by man. It's actually a pretty efficient code system, and what it was bringing the whole world of trade into one style or system or framework, okay? And, of course, that thing's been morphed over, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, into the Holy Roman Empire to Europe, and then back to the Vatican, to canon law, where it appears now as USC code and the UCC code, and it kind of creeps up into there. I mean, they're literally using code that was from 500 BC still today. And, the United States is absolutely set up like a church. They have their own temples, which, you look at a courthouse, you go to the Lincoln Memorial, it's called a temple, and they set the presidents up as gods. You can go to the Capitol building, you can see George Washington depicted as a god, and then you have their priest called the judge, and you have the prosecutor or the cleric, the clerk. You do a sentence or pay a penance, you serve your penance to whatever your conviction is. These are all religious terms. And a lot of people on this call or listening later are going to recognize, everybody's pretty familiar with a lot of the theories or teachings about the Vatican actually being the owner of the crown and how the crown crept in and everything. But they take this Babylonian code, and where it gets into the Bible, for those that are, kind of attuned to that, the Israelites were led into captivity after they were godless, right? They were starting to serve idols and statues, and they were bending their knee to statues, and they were warned by the prophet Jeremiah, hey, you guys are just, you're getting so far off base. We're going to be punished if you don't stop. Yeah, we're the chosen people. He's not going to do anything to us. Don't sweat it. Well, lo and behold, they kept on, and finally God got pissed. Off they go to Babylon. Now, they're down in Babylon for 80 years. That's quite a while. That's a couple generations of kids growing up who learn this code. So you have a whole, people that bring this foreign code when they come back out of captivity into the Temple of Jerusalem, and now they incorporate this code into the temple worship. And this is where Jesus comes in and beats the money changers. Of course, that story is a little different than it's portrayed a lot in modern churches and in teachings. He was literally the king of Israel at that moment. He had come in on the donkey, and they accepted him as the lawful king of Israel. And when he went into the money changers, that was in the far back where, they would take the temple sacrificial coins and wealth of the temple, and then if they were acting up or embezzling money or not doing correctly, the king would whip them over the back of the neck and shoulders with this whip. So when he went in, he was literally showing who he was, because he couldn't have even been in there. And, we talked about, I think it was last week or the week before, JC really wanted me to mention, woe unto you lawyers, in the book of Luke in chapter 11. They had brought this Babylonian system of statue worship, which we know today as statutes. And there's a YouTube channel called Just Conspiracy that has a wonderful video on that called Statue to Statutes, where it's just modern idol worship. You know, you have people really concerned about worshiping these statutes because they're afraid of getting in trouble because the high priest of that church called the United States will punish them if they don't follow these statutes. So essentially they're trading the law of the Creator, which is don't bend your knee to another god, don't serve false idols, but you've got to serve him, you know. So the Tower of Babel was literally built to overthrow God. Like they were building their own kingdom, and they were working their way up to heaven. And that was what they were attempting to do. So, you know, if you take that from the Israelites bringing that back, and that sets up a whole new thing, which we're getting ready to get into, because I'm going to share a couple stories with you that will show you how you absolutely are not only not supposed to bend your knee to foreign governments or other gods, but it's absolutely forbid. And in today's churches, they teach that you're absolutely supposed to. And that's why you see the flag of the United States flying over top of the Christian flag at these churches. It shows who owns that church. The reason it's important to understand this from a biblical perspective for me is because the Creator is the lawgiver. But even from a geopolitical standpoint nowadays, you have a tremendous amount of issues coming out of the Middle East with Israel, the United States, treaties, even flags. You know, there's a deception going on that's so deep that people, it's just almost unimaginable to think that we have been tricked that much, you know, because, you know, we're all pretty smart people, and we're pretty perceptive and honorable. We try to work and take care of our families and stuff, but, you know, over Israel right now, you have a flag flying that literally is this, I always mispronounce it, but it's the Star of Rephaim or whatever it is, but literally it's the hexagram that represents Saturn in Anglo-Saxon tongue, which is Satan or Satan. And, you know, he's talking about graven images. I mean, that's absolutely true, but what's a statue? A statue's a graven image. I mean, it's, you know, you look at the paper and you see this statute. It's literally written in dog Latin to a dead fiction, you know, or a person, which is, you know, the Bible says that God's not a respecter of persons. He created man. And it also says in the latter days that man shall be a lover of death rather than a lover of life. But if you think about that from one perspective, you could say because people are following mammon or money or Baal worship, and they're the lover of that, they're willing to sacrifice the man position to be in the position of a person, which is absolute death. And it leads to debt, and it leads to guilt, and it leads to idol worship, and it's all those things that you think is some other kind of thing that it must mean, like if you're a mafia guy and you kill people and you've got a lot of money. And I mean, it doesn't mean that. I mean, it's a system that has been designed around us to deceive us. I mean, it says in the Bible, he deceives the whole world. I mean, that's pretty significant because we're in that world, you know, and it's like, you mean to tell me, I mean, all of us have woken up at different levels, at different times in our lives. Some people when they're 12, some people when they're 40, some people when they're 72. But just think about where you're at, and I'm sure everybody can feel what I'm getting ready to say. Think of how many times you've tried to carry on a conversation with somebody and tell them some of this information, and they look at you, and then drool starts to come out of the side of their mouth, and they just glaze over, and they'd rather talk about football, the lottery number. Did you hear about that guy on The Voice who won? What a great singer he is. But they're almost completely uninterested in all this truth that you're just slaving over on a computer or in a book, and you're spending all this time trying to figure this stuff out. And it's like they just don't even get it. It's because they think the system that they have, that they're under, that's a real world, but it's really an artificial overlay. I mean, it is not. Legal is not law. Legal is literally the undoing of the Creator's law. I mean, there's a movie called The Devil's Advocate, And I don't know if everybody's seen it or not, but if there's no movie that I'm aware of that's a better depiction of what Lucifer's like. And it's funny that the character they use in that movie is the owner of one of the world's largest law firms. And he says we're gonna create a mess, out of the legal system that's so the stench is going to stink so high that it reaches heaven and chokes the whole lot of them. Well, that sounds just like the Tower of Babel. They're trying to build a system, and and a lot of the players they don't realize it's just like people in any organization. You have people that are privates, and then you have people that are generals, and then you have kings, and those people all possess information and understanding at different varying levels of that society. So they don't all know they're doing evil, but you have to think, when you're doing something wrong, when you're getting over on somebody or when you're capitalizing on someone. I have to think that these people understand that just fine. A lot of them, they may not see the big picture, but they definitely know at the moment that they're doing somebody wrong. So, the Bible also says to come out of Babylon, and it calls it a great mystery and a whore and a harlot. And it's like, okay, so if Jesus is cursing the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes, and he calls them lawyers, because first he says, woe unto you lawyers, you scribes, you Pharisees. And everybody all of a sudden thinks that's just talking about a high priest. Well, it is, but it's also talking about the Sanhedrin, and it's talking about basically the leaders of that religious organization had blasphemed it literally by following false idols and worship, by bringing this mercantile system, this legal system of Babylon back to the temple, and they desecrated the temple. Okay, well, in the book of Revelations, it talks about how that great city, Babylon, falls in an hour. Like it literally just, boom, it's going to fall. And it's interesting who it says mourns that. It says the merchants of the world mourn. So we know it's commerce or admiralty jurisdiction. So it's kind of interesting. If you go into Black's Law, JC, would you look this up can you do that while I'm talking? Can you look definition of church up in Black's Law?
Yeah, I know that you have the book. I will try and find it online.
Oh, here. Okay. Yeah, I forgot I got the book right down here. I thought it was upstairs.
Yeah, do you want to get it out of the book? Because I like the book the most.
Yeah, it'll take a second.
You want me to take over for a moment?
Yeah, take over for a second. 'Cause I really want to read them this definition, man. It's going to blow their minds.
Yeah, so one thing that the Shaman was expounding on earlier was the Tower of Babel. And with the Tower of Babel and the fall of it, it even says, let us go down and give them Babel as a language. And the Babel is basically to babble your mind. And if you look at the English alphabet or the Western alphabet, it's written from left to right. And if you can understand the roots of Latin, you will much better understand almost every single European language.
Yes.
Now, the reason that's written from left to right when all ancient transcripts are written from right to left is because when you actually write from left to right, you use your right hand instead of your left hand, which activates a different part of your brain. And that's why Western civilizations made extreme advances in mathematics, in mechanics, in engineering, and things that operate from the right side of the brain. Whereas all the other cultures around the world, they were still thinking with the left side of their brain, which is more spiritual. They were still connected to the world around them. And that's something that we don't really see today.
Yeah, you see more and more godlessness. The West, especially in the West, but you look at the United States, and you even bring up religion, and people just get pissed at you. It's like, oh, gosh, we got to hear this. But, guys, if you were put here by the Creator, isn't spiritualness pretty important? To just sidestep it seems to me, that's what the New World Order is. They're trying to literally replace God with humankind. They have human rights. They have humanity. Those are monsters. You look up the definition of a human being, it's a monster.
God never created a human.
No, he created man, and he created them from the dust of the earth. I've actually heard movies and other things that call mankind a virus on the earth. How obscene is that? Mankind is made of the earth. How could we possibly be a virus? But that's the kind of crap that you hear and you read and you see, and they're nothing special. And man, I think anybody who looks at a human being or a man on a scientific level, that's pretty remarkable. What I'm getting ready to read, I don't know, if anybody's ever looked this up before, but I want to read you something. It's going to go back to what JC was saying about the church and why what we're talking about is completely different. Look, guys, this is really the secret right here, okay? If you don't understand legalese, because it's a different language, and it is, and you didn't write the Constitution, and it's a caponym on the capital P, which makes it a proper noun, which means you have nothing to do with the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence, Northwest Territorial Governance Act, Magna Carta, the Hague Act, none of these things matter. International law, yada, 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 yada. That's stuff for them, okay? So if you can't serve two masters, and, when the disciples went to Christ, they said, hey, tell us how we should pray. He said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That was the first thing he said, right? That's pretty interesting. Wow, his kingdom. Now, here's another thing. This will rub people, but here's the reality of it. When the rich young ruler came to Christ and said, hey, master, good master, what must I do to inherit the kingdom of God or eternal life? How do I get to heaven? Christ didn't say, well, if you just accept me into your heart as your Lord and Savior, then it'll be cool. He looked him dead in his eye and said, follow the law. And this is the key point. Really, out of everything I've said tonight, this is the most important thing. If Christ is the Word, all life sprang from the sound of God's voice, and Christ being the Word means he is the lawgiver or the law. He takes that law and writes it on your heart. How in the world can you be follower of Christ or saved and then say it's not works of the law that you are saved? They are one and the same. Faith without works, in the book of James says, faith without works is dead, O vain man. It's like, man, they are like one and the same. It's like saying that Yahweh and Jesus are separate. Man, they're the same guy. It's just Jesus is a personification of God because God's too holy for us to see. But listen to this definition of church, man. This is their definition, not ours, but this is theirs, but I think it sums it up pretty well.
I agree with it 100%.
Yeah. I mean, this is great, guy. Like, really pay attention to this, because now you're going to see what the deal is. Definition of church, Black's Law, 6th edition is what I have here. In the most general sense, a religious society founded and established by Jesus Christ to receive, preserve, propagate his doctrines and ordinances. It may also mean a body of communicants gathered into a church order body of community Christians united under one form of government by the profession of the same faith and observance of the same rituals and ceremonies. Did you hear that? They consider the true church a government, its own kingdom. And I have heard guru after guru after guru say, oh, don't go in there with that religious mumbo-jumbo. Don't put that in your face. Oh, it's silly. That's silly. Let me tell you something, guys. I fought one heck of a fight. I mean, dude, it was serious. My life was on the line, literally everything I ever worked for. I don't wish to go into the exact particulars of it. It was a federal issue. I will at some point. But I will tell you right now, what I told the prosecutor was, I'm not of your kingdom. I am of this kingdom of heaven over here. I'm not at war with you. I'm not trying to overthrow you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not a citizen of your kingdom. I'm a citizen of this one. I'm in trust with the Creator, and I do not see a benefit of being in your kingdom at this time. I wish to be let alone. And obviously there's a little bit more than that to it, but essentially that was my stand. And they were cool with it. Told me to have a good, happy Father's Day, and they let me alone, closed the case. Now that's because it was true. It was really in my heart, like, that's who I am, And they see that. They see that truth. They know if you come in there and you've gotten something off the internet or somebody's doing your paperwork for you. And, I mean, just like you guys can tell somebody who's a fraud in certain things, they can see who's really something. You know what I mean? Go ahead, JC. It seemed like you wanted to say something.
There was a call earlier. It was either this week or last week. But a man was talking about nationalism. And the shaman and I were talking to him. And we basically said, when you enter the kingdom of heaven, there is no nationalism. The world of nations is only of this world. It's only in this world. When you enter the nation of heaven, there's no other nation to be found. It's not there. They don't exist.
You know, everybody's wanting to figure out, how do we get out from underneath the jurisdiction of these people? You know, and I hear this a lot too. They force it. They force it on us. They are forcing us. They make us do this and they make us do that. Look, we understand it's thick. We understand that it can be scary. And it is. I ain't gonna lie. I was really, really nervous when I went to the first hearing on that. It was not a pleasant experience. But let's face it, nobody came from the government, put a gun to your head and said, go get a driver's license or a social security number. They didn't force your mother and father to go get a birth certificate. Everything's an offer, counter offer in their world. It's just business. It's not personal. So everything they've ever done is always an offer. They never said you have to have that number or mark, the trademark of the social security number. It's just everybody kind of teaches each other that that's what they have to do. And if you use that, you know, it's what we're trying to get across to some people who are struggling with the personhood. You know, person is just a vehicle. Here's an analogy. I may not do as good as I did the other day with my mom on the phone, but Santa Claus. I can say Santa Claus and everybody on the phone knew who Santa Claus is, what he looks like, how he dresses, everybody has an image of what he drives, where he lives. Man, you could ask kids, is Santa Claus real? They'll tell you, yeah. Some kids will fight you to prove that Santa Claus is real. There are movies about him, coloring books, books written, TV specials about it. There's movies, remakes of movies. They put millions and millions and billions of dollars into this Santa Claus guy who is not real. But like if somebody came here from another planet and they saw that, they would swear Santa Claus was real. So what they've done is they've kind of pounded that into everybody's head all these years using their legal system to brainwash everybody. You know, they're just plugging away, and you swear that name's real and that language is real and that, you know, you have to read this book and this is how you have to act, and, you know, because they're you know, they got a list and they're checking it twice, man, and when in reality you've been given the answer a long time ago. The answer is not to try to overthrow Babylon. That's not what your job is. Your job isn't to tell those people what they must do any more than their job is to tell you what you must do. You know, when we first got with y'all and we decided to do this, we said we're just going to offer you cheesecake. You know, they're eating Twinkies or whatever, and we're offering cheesecake. We're not going to tell everybody if Twinkies are wrong, even if we might think they are. We're just going to do something different. So the church was always designed really to be a safe haven for people. And if you think about it, even in movies or in reality, it's the sanctuary of the church. If you go into a church, technically you've entered holy ground sanctuary. I'm pretty sure that that's what the Continental and the John Wick thing is supposed to represent, even though they use the god Shiva in it. But God, it's a separate kingdom. Yeah.
What about Noriega?
Yeah, I was getting ready to use that. Like Noriega ran into the church when the United States went down there to arrest him, and they would not enter the church and arrest him because they didn't have jurisdiction. You know, that's why the Vatican has its own jurisdiction. But, you know, the Vatican is not the church. Christ is the church. And the people that are in Christ and Christ is in them, that's the church. And the temple is the body, which is the earth, right, where you live. And this is kind of interesting. Gus told me that I should present it like this. Think of it like this, like the Creator makes the spirit, okay, the soul, and he takes that soul and it's you. And he entrusts you with the temple that he puts you in, the body. Okay, so when you die, you're accountable for what you did in that body, but it's a trust, right? So now, let's say you get married, and this is important to remember. So let's say you get married, and you don't need marriage licenses and all that jive. You get married, now you have a soul and a soul who are in trust with the bodies they have who then form a trust with one another. So you really have, 3 trusts going on each way? So now think about that. So what happens when somebody, if you do no wrong, this is contingent on doing no wrong to your fellow man, what happens when they take your husband or your wife from you? Did they not just trespass on a private trust? So what if you have that trust recorded somewhere? You see, it's building your own kingdom. Like, you can't trespass on property of the government, or you can't just go take a truck or a tank, but can they come just take your property either? So it's like a trust. You're building this whole trust system, man. It's like, it's a layer of protection. All these things that the more law we learn, right, and the more we learn where it came from, the more we realize, and I understand that there's a lot of other factors in this, and that some things come from other than Judeo-Christian. I'm not ignorant of that fact, and I don't think the Bible is inerrant either. So I don't mean to suggest that. But, I mean, I think everybody knows we're born with certain things. Like if you smile, you can smile anywhere, and everybody knows that means you're friendly. So there's just certain things that have nothing to do with what man invents, but everything to do with what the Creator creates. But we have to get in my opinion, on common ground, because, man, there's a lot of different stuff out there, and it's hurting people left and right. And the problem is people quit listening to one another. And we've got to, the only way I know to do it is to get on common ground and then help one another so that we can witness things and then help each other when it comes time to move a common law action. Now you have witnesses who can testify with firsthand knowledge. JC?
Yeah.
Do you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Not necessarily about that, but on one of the first calls, they were talking about form of government. And at some point in time, I said, I basically don't care what form of government people operate on. But the shaman and I, we've studied this structure for a really long time. So, everybody knows the difference between a common law court and a civil law court, and common law legal structure and a civil law legal structure. But both of those legal structures are governed by ecclesiastical law. So even if you were in France, if you go in to a civil law court and you jump up with your thought process, who you are, your beliefs, and your understanding, then you can hit the ecclesiastical court. And the highest law is the law of the Creator.
I mean, that's why they used to have you swearing on a Bible when you come in. I mean, that's kind of a clue that here you come into the District Court of the United States, and then they grab a Bible and have you swear by it, which you're not technically supposed to do, but that tells you what the highest law in the room is.
And that could be why they have the birth certificates, too. Because remember how you said it just now, they used to put it in the Bible to keep track of the names?
So absolutely.
The state basically took over that common law function. That's directly out of the common law.
Yeah, you see how everything's a usurpation? It's like what they do is they offer you a little bit, okay, Satan in the garden, right? Like, hey, you're not going to die. Come on, did he really say that? Look, I can give you some killer knowledge, man. No, like, all right, so, boom, mankind's on a rocket ship ride. And then what's ironic is when Cain killed Abel, he received a mark, and it's debatable what that mark is. It could be red hair, it could have been blue eyes. But one thing it is kind of interesting, what is always associated with evil? Cain, Lucifer, and punishment or destruction. City-states. You ever notice that? Sodom, Babylon, Gomorrah. I mean, it's always all these city-states. So in other words, it's representative of government. Like, here's a really interesting story. It'll show you exactly how bad it is. So the Israelites they're enslaved in Egypt. Now, we always have this image that they're getting hit with whips and, they're being starved to death and beaten. But that really was not how it was. They were a highly skilled workforce that had moved there a long time ago. And they were literally working and being protected by the Pharaoh, right? And they were taxed. And they were considered slaves by God because here they were under the authority of another king, and him being a jealous God, he doesn't share his throne with anyone. It's a long story, but essentially they were taxed at about a 21 to 22% tax rate. and that can be discovered through historical documents. And Moses' real name was Tutmosis. He was actually supposed to take over as the Pharaoh, but there was some issues, and they allude to that in that new movie they made with what's-his-name who played Batman, of trickery, how the Pharaoh really wanted him to be the Pharaoh when he died, Ramses. So anyway, Moses gets them out of Egypt, and they're on their way, right? So they've been under this Pharaoh for a long time. And, they're going through the desert, and they're just complaining, man. They're like, oh, my gosh, Moses, do you even know where we're going to get water and food? He says, look, don't sweat it. God's going to provide everything you need, man. Just trust him. You look up there in the sky. He's leading you by a cloud, or he's leading you by fire. Let's just hush. Let's go. And he feeds them with the manna, right? He's doing all these cool things, and all they're doing is complaining. Well, Moses goes up to get the law, etched in stone, I might add, and it was a whole lot more. It was well over 600 commandments, by the way. But he goes up to get these commandments, and while he's up there, they said it'd be better for us to go back to Egypt under Pharaoh than die here in the desert. And they were considered free at this point. So he goes up to get the tablets, and then what do? They take all the gold, right, of all the tribes, and they smelt it down, and they make this golden statue of a cow or a bull, which is a symbol for Baal, okay, and Mammon. Well, isn't there a big bull out in front of the stock market in New York City right now? Yeah. So can somebody tell me what that bull actually was? Does anybody know that answer? What was the bull that they smelted and made?
You mean what did it represent, or what was it?
Yeah. No, it literally represented something, absolutely.
Could it be bullshit?
Well, in a way. Yeah, in a way. Yeah, in a way, yeah. Well,
I would actually say there's kind of two answers to the...
Yeah, but don't say it, because you've heard me tell you. Let them answer.
They created their own God.
Yeah, in a way, but here's
could it just be that even God itself is just a creation?
No.
Man.
Well,
if you believe
some gods are.
Your belief.
Yeah. Yeah, some gods. But here's what it really meant, okay? Here's what they did. They took all the gold from the tribes. All the tribes were free. All the people were free. They had their own money. They could do whatever they wished, okay? They were truly free to follow God the way they wished. They turned right around and melted it all down and put it in one central place. They created a central bank. It was a common practice back then to make these statues, and in times of war, they would melt the statue down and use it to buy weapons and things. But what they would do is they'd create armies to protect the central banks. They'd take the wealth. Now, all the people were locked into one thing. Like they were no longer free. Now they had joinder. They were bound to that freaking statue. And it became idolatrous because now they were more concerned with the bull than they were the creator. You see? So when Moses came down, he was pissed because they literally just put themselves back under a city-state form of government that they had just left instead of trusting the creator to provide for them.
Wow.
And I agree with that interpretation 100%. The only thing that I would add is that the other representation of the bull is Baal.
That's what I just said. I said it was Baal. Yeah.
Yeah, Baal. Baal, like Baal, like as in you got to get Baal to get out of jail, right? Baal and Baal. And if you look at Baal and like where Baal
comes
from, it's Babel.
Yep, right back to Babylon. And here's why
Babylon.
Here's why that's really interesting, guys. And this gets into a couple of other fun things. And JC and I do this all the time. We sit around the phone all the time talking about this stuff. There's an ancient Egyptian god called Kek, and his skin's green. I'm sure all of you guys surfing YouTube can't help but come across the reptilian race of people that rule everybody. But in ancient Bible days, Nimrod, okay, the guy who ordered the building of the Tower of Babel, his skin color was bluish green. And he was actually a hybrid. Like you had the Nephilim back then where the angels slept with the daughters of men. They created these giants on the earth called the Nephilim. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. But they were God-men is basically what they were. And the Greeks called them the Titans, like Zeus and all those guys. They were literally a representation of that. And those were real, by the way. So you had these giants on the earth. Well, he was basically one of those, and Esau actually cut his head off, and that's when he gave up his birthright. When he went back, he had just got through killing Nimrod. Well, it's kind of funny. If you really look at Bible interpretation, it says Nimrod is going to be the one that comes back as the Antichrist. Like it's Nimrod who's going to do it. So when Nimrod was killed, you had the Tower of Babel, right? You had one God king named Nimrod, but when the Creator came down and said, "Let us confound their speech so that they cannot become as one of us," talking about the Trinity. The funny thing is about 3200 BC, you'll notice all of a sudden all these gods start popping up in the world. Baal, Isis, just all these different god names. But if you trace them all back, like Baal, it means Babel. They all are Nimrod's name in different tongues because now they couldn't speak the same language. So God doesn't even want unity for unity's sake. He only wants unity under his law. He confounded everybody's speech because he wished to do so, But I just think it's pretty interesting that all those different gods that people worship are literally the mystery Babylon whore, and it goes back to Nimrod. You can see it in every culture, in every religion. They all, when you funnel them back and get them to the root, it goes right back to Babylon.
And one thing that the Shaman and I consciously for several days thought about expressing before we went on the air was the fact that what we're bringing to you guys, what we're bringing to the public, this isn't ours, okay? Like we did not create the law. We cannot claim it, okay? This is the Creator's gift to all of us. And the Shaman, he put it to me so beautifully one day because somebody of authority came to him and said, "You think you're sovereign, don't you?" And he said, "Nope. I just know I was granted sovereign rights by the one true sovereign." And that's what we have. We have sovereign rights that were granted by the one true sovereign. When I argue with people in the legal society, with attorneys, and they tell me that statute and law is the same thing, the first thing I come back at them with is statute and law is the same thing, and they're always going to agree with themselves. The next thing I say, show me the statute of gravity.
Or the sun rising. Yeah, you guys should have been there for my deposition. It was like 3 hours long. And essentially what they were trying to do was they were trying to see if I was going to violently react. They were wanting to see, if I considered myself a quote-unquote sovereign citizen, if I thought that this and that and that and this, and was I a danger? The answer is absolutely not. That's where we were talking about getting rid of the fear. Like, the more you know why you believe something, the easier it is to understand the what. If you don't understand why you're trying to do something, like what is the purpose? It's not enough just to not pay taxes or to get out of a speeding ticket. That is just one element of it. The real root of it is you wish to be free, okay? And there's only one way to be free. You know what I'm saying?
That's to be it. To be free is to be free without trying.
Yeah. Yeah, you're free. You have to struggle, man, because you've got a whole system that's designed against you.
Well, let me tell you what you just
you're
said
right. Be
there.
free.
You were just talking about course of conduct. Like, if you just live the life that you know is right, you know what I'm saying? And you develop this course of dealings with people which resembles righteousness, you know what I'm saying? And that course of dealing is what basically determines whether or not you have standing. What's your come from?
Exactly.
I wish to express something, if I may, like speaking of freedom and, knowing right and wrong in your heart. I grew up in a very unique situation. When I grew up, and I know that everybody's heard about people waking up, and I'm really grateful that people are waking up. But when I grew up, there were a lot of things wrong in my head, and I didn't know why. And when I was 12 years old, kind of like most boys will be boys, me and a bunch of other boys in this neighborhood, we got into boyish fights. And, I guess just being smarter than the average bear, I went to my neighborhood cop and I said, hey, me and some other people, we like to get into fights with each other. What's the best way to do it, like legally? And we sat down with the code book, and we pretty much came to the conclusion that, hey, if you write out a contract and the two people fighting sign the contract saying that, basically the other person's parents can't hold them liable, okay. And if the neighborhood cop shows up, he's just going to fire a round into the air and we're going to scatter. We already had it planned out. But after that, I had very troubled teenage years, and I got into a lot of drugs. And so then I started talking to the neighborhood cop about that. And he basically sat down, we talked about situations that could happen, and I had the luxury of hearing some of his own experiences. And that brought a lot to the forefront of my mind. And so basically, after every time we talked, I'd always go away and he'd say, JC, just remember, it's not illegal until you get caught. And even if you get caught, you're innocent until you're proven guilty. And he would always tell me there's a million ways for that substance to get in that spot without you knowing about it, unless it's like actually on your person. You know what I mean? And all you got to do is just come up with one little story to settle the court. And so I followed that advice. And then, growing a little older, I started selling drugs, and I had a way of doing it. And I never sold any drugs that I didn't get caught with, ever. Just a disclaimer, Can
I make a statement real quick that might shock you guys? Every claimant must succeed by strength of his own title, and not by the weakness of his antagonist. So what that's saying basically is possession is 9/10 of the law. And the fact that you only have a birth certificate copy, you only get the copy and the state keeps the original, it says a lot about this placement of the strength of the title. The presumption of jurisdiction is intertwined. Just want to say that.
Okay. Well, that's cool. What I was just getting at is, I've been arrested for 13 felonies and 8 misdemeanors in multiple different jurisdictions. I always had the attitude, take me before a jury, because I know I didn't do anything wrong. I know I didn't do anything wrong. There was this one time in my county, they arrested me kind of consecutively. In fact, one time I go to jail in my bathrobe, okay? And the woman who's checking me in, she already knows who I am. And she's like, good Lord, JC, what were you doing to get arrested in your bathrobe? And I look at her dead straight face, and I'm like, man, I was just playing Grand Theft Auto 3. I guess they don't like that game anymore.
I think you know what
I
it was.
Got out
possibly
of the shower.
You gave your birthday also, right? When you were trying to help them? You were very helpful.
No.
You sound like a very helpful person. Like I don't think that you would have a problem being helpful. You're not?
I'm funny. When the cop kicked in my door, he grabbed me by the throat, he slammed me against the wall, and he goes, if you know what's good for you, you're going to tell me where the money and the dope is right now. And I told him, I would.
Oh, my God.
Look, I am really helpful. The only thing is, I knew you guys were coming, and there's no money or dope here. There just wasn't anything there. I got that cop fired. And I didn't even do the common law route. I didn't even know the common law route back then. I just knew what I had to do in my job.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time they enter in on a drug warrant, it's all hearsay. Everything that they go to the magistrate with is hearsay. But I didn't know that back then. All I knew is that what I was doing in my heart was correct. And I was willing to walk in front of a jury for it, and whether they took my life, didn't take my life, I was willing to stand for it. It caused lots of tension for me and my family. And I finally just had to get to the point where I said, hey, look, you guys, even if I go to prison, even if I get locked up for years, I'll be no different than any other man, woman, or child throughout the history of mankind that stood up for what they believed in and were killed or imprisoned for it. And that's just where my heart was at. That's just where my heart was at. But when I had a son, when I had the light of my world, the light of my life, that changed because the feds were coming down on me pretty hard. So I just walked away. Like, I just walked. And I spent a lot of time thinking, and I was like, man, this law stuff, it's really interesting. And if I wish to make a better world for my child, for my little sunshine, then I better get down to a law library and figure this out. And that's kind of my background story on how I actually learned how to do some of this stuff. But every step of the way, God was holding my hand. And that's just something I wish to express to y'all tonight.
I was reading a documentary the other night about the very thing that Sean just got to talking about with Nimrod and Babylon and how he's going to be the final Antichrist and how it all works in. And there was something interesting in that. I just wanted to see if anybody else had seen it this way or given any thought to it. If I'm wrong, please correct me, but I believe after Nimrod's death, didn't his wife rule for so many years after that? And the fact that their languages were changed, she, as well as Nimrod, in other languages, was known by several names, one of which is Columbia. And then you've got Washington, the District of Columbia. I never put this together before. And then you got the dome over the White House with the statue of Columbia.
Yeah, and you know who Columbia is.
Yeah, listen to this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking, you have masculine and feminine in everything,
Well, that is. You're absolutely right. If you look at the Baphomet, it's like that.
Right, and so I'm thinking, okay, all this stuff is supposed to happen over in what we call, quote, unquote, the Holy Land is where, Nimrod's supposed to make his return and everything. That's the masculine side of it. If the United States, the place that we live in, is granted that kind of power and it's under the statue of Columbia.
Wait just a minute. You said, the United States where we're supposed to live in, correct?
Well, the country that we live in that's called the United States of America, where Washington, D.C.
Hold up for a second. The United States is only the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C.
What's your question? Like, what are you asking?
It's not necessarily a question. It's an observation of the fact that puts this place, Washington, D.C., which kind of rules this nation, so to speak, and I quote, unquote that, but you know what I'm talking about, under the, not jurisdiction, but with the Columbia thing, which goes back to Nimrod, which goes back to his rule and her rule, and I just wonder where the masculine-feminine companionship between them and us comes in.
You have the Queen of Heaven, and it comes right back to Nimrod. That's where it really originates. Even the Canaanite god El had a wife. I can't remember the name now, but the interesting thing was, I'll just go really fast. City of London within the City of London is one star. The Vatican is another star. The United States is the other star. You have the bankers, the religious, and the military. That's the District of Columbia's flag. They are the city-states that rule the world, okay, essentially. And then they really do. I mean, they really pretty much run commerce, and they use intimidations and everything. But the Queen of Heaven, or Mary, as she's known in Catholicism, or Allah in Muslims, that's why you always see Mary either have a crescent moon above her head or she's standing on one, or sometimes it's depicted as the horn, okay, that comes up from behind her. And then Allah is the moon god, and there you have the Luciferia. That's the Luciferianism. That's the ancient moon god. And it's interesting. The Statue of Liberty is actually Lucifer, but the goddess Pax on the back of the coin, the denarius, that Christ. I wanted to remind me to get to that, JC. It's important about that Rendon Caesar thing. Can I just go ahead and get into that real quick? Because that'll answer her question, too.
Can I just throw in a couple of things about Columbia? So Columbia, like, think about Columbia pictures, okay? It has basically a symbolism for the Statue of Liberty. And then you look at the Statue of Liberty, that's Columbia. Okay, so Columbia is literally Luciferian. It's the light bearer. And this is something that I go over with people, is that if someone else is bringing you light, it's not good light.
It's not God.
Like, yeah, the light should burn within inside of you. Okay, like you understand the light from within you. So anybody, any person, man, woman, group, organization, church,
prophet,
secret society, anything that says that they are going to bring you the light, I would be very wary of.
Unless they say that light is Yeshua or the Creator, God.
So, but in my belief, if that light is the true light of Yeshua, Yahweh, the true Creator, then you're going to find it within yourself. Maybe they bring you to the tools to get there.
Yep.
But you'll find it within yourself. And that was the only thing that I wish to express about Columbia. So if you wish to go ahead.
Well, it's interesting how it ties in, and this is where you get back to this stuff, man. It's like you look into all these other religions and things. It's pretty fascinating how the symbology and a lot of the teachings, you know, you'll see these little links that go all the way back to that time period. And you know, it's like you have some similarities even in Christianity with Mithraism, Zoroastrianism, and some of these other things that are undeniable, okay, in modern Christendom, okay? I'm not talking about true Christendom. I'm talking about modern Christendom, which is in a really bad shape, and that's putting it mildly. But I wish to address something I got off point earlier. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the render under Caesar thing, and a lot of churches, they preach, man, that you are absolutely supposed to submit to the authority of government, that it's the higher power, and that's absolutely not what it's saying. When the lawyers, okay, came to Christ, he's hanging out one day, and they come running up to him, and they're like, hey, are we supposed to pay taxes? And he looks at them, and he's just kind of writing, and he's like, oh, all right, just throw me the coin. And they threw him the coin, and the coin was a gold coin, and it's called a denarius, which they use the dinar today, but it was called a denarius. And the Romans, only this particular coin, only the soldiers, the politicians, and the high priest of the temple really used. And it was such a holy coin that they weren't allowed to take it into a brothel or a bathroom, and if they got caught, it could mean the penalty of death. And the coin, as I'm remembering, it read on the front, had a picture of Caesar, and it said, son of the god Tiberius Caesar, and on the back it had a picture of what we see today as the Statue of Liberty, of the goddess Pax, the goddess of peace. So literally what the coin said was, Son of God, Prince of Peace. So Christ said, a very interesting thing. He said, whose inscription and image is on this coin? And they said, Caesar's. And he flipped it back and he said, then render unto Caesar what's Caesar's and unto God what's God. Okay, he wasn't saying you follow God and you follow Caesar. That's not what he was saying at all. He was saying, all right, inscription, it's an idol. Thou shalt not worship any engraven image. This is an engraven coin. It's mammon. It's Baal. We're right back to Baal worship again. And he said, look, you either follow me or you follow the guy on this coin. But either way, you choose. And he flipped it back to them. And that's why they went away with their mouths shut, because even those attorneys couldn't get past that.
Well,
he flat out laid it down, man.
Even take it one step further. How many people have carved their initials onto like a wooden chair to say, I was here, or I claim this chair? Or think about being a 5-year-old. That's my ball. Is your name on it? Man, it has that man's name. It has that man's face. It says it's his. Go return it to him.
I mean, it's really interesting how the misconceptions, and it makes a lot of people dislike the Creator because they think he's just crazy. You know, there's so many, they're so hypocritical, and there's so many. Man, there's not. I will tell you this, that when I really started discovering law and the true languages, a lot of things started to make a whole lot more sense. and you see some really interesting teachings, man, and they're just flat out, you really have a hard time. But it's interesting how cool Jesus actually was and how much he hated the system of his day. But the interesting thing was, like, think about this, at his trial, when they were getting ready to crucify him, they take him before Pontius Pilate, and they say, hey, we want this man crucified, he's claiming to be king. And Pilate looks at him and says, hey, you the king of the Jews? He said, it is as you say. He looked at the crowd, he said, man, I can't do nothing to this guy. He's not attacking Rome. He's not against Rome. He's not going against, I don't have jurisdiction over him. I'm washing my hands of this. If you all want to crucify him, you do it. And they say, good, let us, well, it was paraphrasing, but basically let the curse fall on our children and our children's children. Let it be on us. And he's like, good, I wash my hands of it. Y'all killing an innocent man. Now think about it. He just said he was king, but Caesar wasn't threatened by it. Being, Pontius Pilate being a representative of Rome. The reason was because Jesus wasn't trying to overthrow Rome. He was doing his own thing. It wasn't his jurisdiction. And this is what some people know as self-determination. That's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about joining a kingdom that was completely set up for you to be free and be in the world, but not of it. Like, you can be completely cool and at peace, at least for now. There's going to come a time, I guess, they start lopping people's heads off for it, but at least right now, they're not doing that. They're okay with it as long as you are real and you're not going up there and being fake. And you could say the church is an unincorporated association, but literally that kingdom is a separate kingdom and they don't have jurisdiction over it.